going to limit the debate to 25 minutes to each side, and we will observe that 25 minutes pretty closely. A moment of prayer, if we would bow our heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, we again thank you for another day. We ask that you lead, guide, and direct us in all the things that we say and do, and that the decisions that we make today will be pleasing in your sight. We ask that you take all those that have come a long distance, take them home safely this evening. In these names we pray. Amen. In your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Okay, Chairman McCall, you want to come up and give us any more information that you have? I want to point out to the people in the audience that we do have a signer up here in the front, and that on either side the screen is showing that to everybody up as well. So we've tried to make that available to everybody, and where everybody can either see or hear what is being said today. Okay, Chairman McCall.
I kind of apologize to you, Mr. Chairman, for letting your first bill out of the gate be something that we have to handle like this. And I also think that tabling this the other day was a smart move to allow some more information to get to different members of the committee. And I'm going to talk for just a second, and then I want, since you gave us 25 minutes, I want all these other people behind me that have a whole lot more experience in this to talk, and I want you to give them a chance. Historically, in the past, under the Department of Labor, the Division of Rehab Services took the lion's share of the budget cuts that came from Department of Labor, and I'm talking about way back, which is one reason I think it would be a better switch over into Department of Human Services. And you've heard some, I don't want to call them scare tactics, but some mention of the fact that federal funds would be lost. Federal funds go with whichever agency administers a program when it comes down to rehabilitation services. The speakers behind me are going to represent thousands of people who have a history with vocational rehab services back when there was a DHR, and they were with them when they moved from DHR to DOL to the Department of Labor, and they witnessed some of the less than positive changes that has occurred over the past few years. They see the benefits of moving vocational rehab back under the Department of Human Services. And I think they, if you'll listen, are enthusiastic about some of the conference calls with Commissioner Reese and the high level of participation he has showed in the past few weeks toward getting rehab services back into Department of Human Services. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to sit down and let the folks that have the real hands-on experience talk to y'all, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Chairman McCall, to these people that have the hands-on experience, are they signed up here to speak, or?
I hope they are.
Just a second. Okay, Representative Hextall.
Chairman McCall, may I ask you a question, please? I've known you a long time and really admire your ability to transfer information to us and also to pursue relevant legislation. But in my heart of hearts, I want to know, with your experience and with your expertise and your background and your longevity up here, why are you pushing, I shouldn't say why are you committed to making this legislation come to fruition?
It's like I told you before, I had a son that passed away in 2000 that was confined to a wheelchair. I wish he could have lived long enough to take advantage of some of vocational rehab services. Also, my daughter, and it's kind of, I'm telling you this because it's kind of a personal thing, and if folks label me as somebody who doesn't care, then they are dead wrong. My daughter started a club in the high school where I come from. She was a founder of it that puts regular ed high school students with special needs students over the whole county. It started out being just a group of friends, and they call it Friends Helping Friends, and that's the biggest club in our county. They take applications to be members of this club. So I have that kind of a personal feeling and relationship to the people that I think would be better served under DHS.
Follow-up question, if it's okay with Mr. Chairman. Then, Mr. McCall, then my question directly to you would be, since you do have a personal testimony, and I know we all are concerned about our kids, and in my case, grandkids also, would your child survived? Would your child have survived if the agency were at that time transferred to DHR?
Survived as in living?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay. Well, when you brought that up, I was just concerned how was the correlation between what you were saying.
I was correlating the fact that I understand about the needs of handicapped people is what I was talking about.
Do we have anyone from the governor's office that wants to speak this time? Okay. We'll start taking the list of names here. Since you didn't put whether you were for it or against it, I'm just going to call the names. For those of you that are in wheelchairs, we have a microphone, a corded mic that we will get to you so that you can speak. And the rest of you can come to the podium right here. Keith Clausen.
My name is Keith Clausen. I'm with Parents Educating Parents and Professionals. I am reading an email on behalf of an individual who was unable to attend today. It reads, I've been making calls to the representatives on the community voicing my concerns as both a citizen and an SRC member and making it clear that the bill should be opposed. The information regarding the cost, disadvantages, and diminished services, if moved, was very helpful. What I've learned so far is that the representatives are receiving an overwhelming comments and phone calls to oppose this bill, and that message is coming through loud and clear. I got it straight from the offices of both Democratic and Republican representatives. In fact, Representative Collins' office stated that they haven't seen any comments to vote for this bill's passage, and they've received far more than they have anticipated. Every comment has been to oppose this bill. For medical reasons, I cannot attend or speak at the hearing today, but I will link in and stay on this by calling the representative offices and also post my comments. We've almost nailed this coffin shut. Dory, Pearl Training Solutions. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Who's 17?
It's me.
Okay.
Thank you for the speaker. And I do have a question. Who did they speak with? I'm Representative Collins. Who did they speak with in my office?
It doesn't state on this email.
Okay. Did they say they talked to me?
It just stated that they spoke with Representative Collins' office.
Okay.
It is Dory with Pearl Training Solutions. She's on the call right now, and I'm sure that she'd be more than happy to leave a comment stating the individual that she spoke with in your office.
Okay, because I had not received the call, so I just is curious, from that perspective. I just want to know who. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mark Johnson. All right, we're going to get the microphone to you. No, I think it'll reach. Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon. First of all, could I get somebody to give you my testimony?
Are you wanting those given out to the?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you'll go down there and get
Anybody
those and.
I know you all got it by email, but I know you also get a lot of emails. Yeah, just tell me where to go. First of all, my name is Mark Johnson. I've been the Director of Advocacy at the Shepherd Center here in Atlanta for 25 years. I want to thank the governor and his staff, sponsors of the HB 831, and this committee for making employment of people with disabilities important. I think that's really what this is about. It's about making employment of people with disabilities important. I didn't say people confined to chairs. I didn't say the handicapped. I didn't say the differently abled. I said people with disabilities. I'm a person with disability, and I'm proud of it, and that's what I am. So thanks for making employment important. Thanks for providing me and other stakeholders here the opportunity to share our observations, concerns, and ideas. After my injury in 1971, I received services from vocational rehabilitation in another state and went on to complete my master's degree in 1977. Since then, I've worked full-time in 3 different states. Since 1971, I've witnessed the implementation of the Architectural Barriers Act of 1968 and Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 73. I've also witnessed President Bush's signing the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, as well as the Olmstead decision. Unfortunately, I've also witnessed multiple lawsuits against the state of Georgia and others for noncompliance. I give that background because there's been a paradigm shift here. We used to think it was all right to send people to Milledgeville, didn't we? Because we thought that was what was best for them, and well-intended people did that. That is no longer the solution. The solution now is about integrating people. The solution now is about including people. And therefore, public policy, things like the Architectural Barriers Act, things like Section 504, things like ADA, are laying that groundwork for a new paradigm, a new day, a day where people with disabilities are valued, not labeled, where they're supported and not siloed, where we don't become the middle of what I think is a power struggle. Since 1990, stakeholders in Georgia have created the state's ADA coordinator's office. Did any of you know here we had a state ADA coordinator's office? And if so, could you tell me where it's located? Because it's not located where I think it ought to be located, in the governor's office. We've also witnessed the creation of 9 independent living centers around the state. No state dollars, all federally funded. The state is yet to invest in independent living in this state. We've seen the creation of SOURCE. Money follows the person. There are people in nursing facilities now that don't want to be there. And through a federal initiative, we now have the option where that money is being spent on those individuals that can support those individuals in their community. We've also seen the Independent Care Waiver Program created back in 1990. We've also seen the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund created, where if you get a DUI in this state, a percentage of that fine goes to provide valuable support to people with brain and spinal cord injuries. And we've also seen the creation of a disability law and policy network. Why do I say all that? Because we're moving in the right direction, and we're moving together, and I hope we can move together on this issue. I've learned that until there's an emotional change or attitudinal change, and advocates take risk, no intellectual persuasions work. I know there were people that were strong-armed not to oppose this bill. I know people that got phone calls and said, "Are you going to support this?" I said, "No, I'm going to have to remain neutral." They could not feel the comfort level to come out here and tell you what they really feel. Personally, I don't think we'd be having this hearing if in December leadership hadn't violated the principle of nothing about us without us. You know, when you want, in this day and time, to know what people with disabilities want and need, you ask them. And if there is a trade group in this community that brought this solution forward to you, if there is a professional in this community that brought this solution forward to you, then I challenge them to tell me what consumers they talk to come up with that recommendation. So we wouldn't even be having this hearing if that principle of nothing about us hadn't been violated. People with disabilities should be the first to be consulted. Even well-intended individuals try to make things better. It's about respect. You know, I don't do a lot of this. You know, I teach people what their rights are, and I encourage them to claim their own power and to get involved and establish relationships with people like you. I want to thank the chair, and particularly over the last week, we've had, I think, a good series of exchanges of emails because we are communicating with each other, right? We're respecting each other. And I don't think this process up to now has respected people. That's what gets me animated. 10 years ago, the disability community, including the Shepherd Center, spoke. We wanted a single point of entry, not multiple, but a single point of entry, and equal access to jobs programs. So we supported moving DRS to DOL, and that move is working. This weekend, I forwarded an alert to peers, colleagues, and you. I wanted you to know the kind of stuff that's going out there in this community. I've been contacted by both satisfied and unsatisfied and angry customers. I've also been contacted by individuals, like I said, who feel intimidated. Regardless, the facts are clear. More needs to be done. Improvements need to be made. Since moving to DOL, DRS placements have gone up, even in the face of the economy. Moving DRS to DHA unnecessarily puts funding, whether it's $2 million plus for transition or whether it's loss of federal funds. Wherever it is, it's a loss of resources. It's an unnecessary transition. It's an unnecessary disruption. Moving DRS into an agency, organizational culture where they talk about people with disabilities like we're something versus people, putting that kind of responsibility in the agency with that kind of culture whose primary focus isn't employment will reduce access and disrupt services. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Hopefully the governor, his staff, sponsors of this bill, and this committee use this opportunity, and I call it moment in history, to make things better. Right now it feels like a power struggle with, unfortunately, the disability community in the middle. The Shepherd Center is extremely concerned about HB 831 and ask you to adopt a broader approach the problem of employment for people with disabilities by creating a multi-stakeholder work group that makes recommendations to the governor by the end of the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate you coming forward today. Commissioner Butler, do you wish to speak today? I thought I saw Commissioner Mark Butler. And do you want to speak today?
I feel like the author of the bill. I don't want to take any time from these people that have taken time out of their day that services affect them, but I do would like to defend ourselves on a couple of points that have been brought out. One of those has to be in the closing statement on our meeting on last Thursday. It was said that we took unfair cuts to vocational rehabilitation. Some of y'all may not be aware of the fact that vocational rehabilitation and safety inspections are the only two areas where we get dedicated state funds. Right now, we are at a deficit in safety inspections. So all we have left for the required 2% cut is vocational rehabilitation. Everything in DOL is collected funds, which is different, and we use federal funds to collect those funds. What we requested the governor's office was we went by the book and said 2%. We handed it to him. I asked for that not to be included in his recommendation, that those cuts be restored because we couldn't afford the loss of federal funds. What came out of the budget request was the 2% that we had requested in there, or we were required to put in, plus an additional cut of $180,000. Plus, we were also cut another $5.7 million on DOL. Those funds come out of operating to go toward the interest payment on the UI Trust Fund. So, as said before, the cut was not spread out amongst the agency. It was actually increased in VR with the governor's recommendation. To that end, we have not been using scare tactics with you. I promise you, I am straight up with you about the loss of federal funds. The federal funds I'm talking about comes out of one program where we use DOL resources from the career centers to help out with VR with our integrated service model, where we are able to draw down additional federal dollars, which will be lost with this transition because they will no longer be an integrated service model. But with that, I don't want to take up any more time. There are people here who have traveled a long way. 25 minutes is not very long for the citizens of Georgia to speak. They're for or against to this bill. And they're the ones that need to be given a time to let their voice be heard, because that's what the process is about. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on just a minute. I got someone. Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I have a question about something you just brought up. That last question from Thursday has been on my mind as well. As a department, are you invited in to talk to the governor prior to his budget planning to say, if we have to make cuts, this is where we want to make them? Is there an opportunity for that type of a discussion to take place?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And when that conversation took place for this last budget cut, the 2%, who made the decision that that comes strictly from vocational rehab?
Well, like I said, we are somewhat restricted where we can cut. That's the only place where we really have general state funds that come into the agency. The rest of the DOL is federal funds. And so you really cannot take the 2% out of that. We do have safety inspections, however, but y'all just restored some of the funding that we had lost. Right now we have a very difficult time actually making that budget, the ends meet at the end of the year with that budget. It is already trimmed to the point where we are 8,000 inspections behind. We can't afford any more cuts, but we were required to present a budget with 2% cuts, which we did as required. But during that meeting, I asked for those cuts not to go through because they make the final determination of what the estimate is. And I've also spoke at length to the advocacy community, had them over at DOL and told them that I was going to work with them if we could not get it restored, to work with the General Assembly to get it restored to them, because I firmly believe we need to pull down as many dollars as possible.
One last question, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Prior to you taking this position, how often were those cuts taken from vocational rehab?
Well, that's pretty much the only place it can be cut in the Department of Labor.
All right, so even prior to you being there, these same types of cuts were being made in vocational rehab.
Right.
Thank you.
I have a question. On these required 2% cut, I know it's probably a play on words, but was it required or requested 2%?
We were required to present a budget with 2% cuts.
Okay. In the meeting with the governor, did you bring documentation for that?
Yes, we have to bring in different documents and things like that.
Okay. All right. Number 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question that did come up the other day, and I want to go back. You did have lapse funds, and this is not just your tenure, but prior tenures as well. Can you explain the lapse funds issue, which could have drawn down? In that 2009, it was 174,000 returned to the Treasury, 215 in 2010, and 254 last year, which the 254 from last year could have drawn down another $1 million in match. Why was there lapse funds? Was there a problem in going through that?
I would probably need to have a little assistance.
That's understandable.
You might want to step up here.
Come on up to the microphone.
I would really need to see that documentation. I'm not with budget and finance, and so I'm not familiar with the funds that you're talking about we lapsed. The information that we've been sharing, accurate information, is that we have returned over $62 million to the federal government in the last 2 years because of failure to be able to match those dollars. So when you're talking about lapsed state funds,
these would have went back to the Treasury from fiscal years 9 through 11.
Right. But all of those would have been unmatched dollars, not state funds. So
okay,
again, the figures that you're quoting are not familiar to me.
Okay. Well, unmatched dollars would not go back to the state fund. If they were federal dollars, they went back to federal. These are state dollars that came back to the state general fund.
Okay. Again, I would need to see the records of what you're referring to. I'm
Thank
not
you.
aware of any
I
state
appreciate
dollars.
your answer. Thank you so much. I have one more question.
Okay.
Is there, Commissioner, on the issue of where cuts can be taken, and I understood, and I think we've actually had this discussion before as far as administrative fees and stuff that go through on the coming back from the fees, that you're saying there's no other place to cut except VR. Monies that come in on administrative fee from unemployment employers pay in comes into the state treasury and is reallocated back to the State Department of Labor, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that would be state dollars.
No. Those are
okay.
Those are collected funds that we use federal funds to collect on.
Is it not true that right now that the Department of Labor is the only one that makes that argument that those are not state funds. And I think we've discussed this, in prior budget years, because in fact, you actually helped me understand some of this in prior years.
I can show you documentation where previous administrations and previous OPB directors agreed with that assessment, because in legislation that you voted on last year, we agreed that those monies that come out of the unemployment tax, an assessment on the unemployment tax, are to be used to fund the operations of ES and UI. And that's the agreement that was made with the business community to put that in there.
Sure.
Some of that also can be used to pay some of the interest, but the feds are very strict. If you use federal monies to collect a fee, it must go back into the program that it was collected for.
Right. And you work off the administrative part that is taken off of the federal grant that comes down with that, correct? You use the money. You use a part of that money for administration.
Some of it, yes.
Yes.
I
That's
mean,
all
we have mixed funding. It comes from multiple sources.
I understand. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for the commissioner? Okay, thank you very much. David Tanner. I thought David was in here. I have first name Yvonne. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. You're with the Office of Planning and Budget.
Yes, sir, I am.
This lady's here to answer any questions that you might have that deal with the budgeting issues. If any of you have, I noticed that one of you asked a question of Commissioner Butler. If you want to ask that question of her, that will be fine. Do I have? All right, number 24.
Ma'am, on line 20, it starts talking about the relating to the Georgia Industries for the Blind and transferring direction and supervision to the Department of Human Services. Will there be any change in the amount of money that allotted that they receive now as to what would be if it goes to different division?
No, sir. The funds will be moved totally from Department of Labor to DHS.
And one last question. Any
Yes, sir.
possibility of losing this particular facility in my district?
No, sir.
Okay. Do I have any other question? Number 19.
Yes, ma'am. At the beginning, this seemed to be a question that was coming up. There seems to be some question about the federal funds being transferred. In your opinion, is there any problem with the federal funds being transferred if the situation is moved?
No, sir. The program, the feds will allot the the grant funds will go to the agency that is administering the program. So if DHS is administering the VR program, then they will receive the federal funds.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any others? Number 17.
Could you go into the lapse fund issue that we just discussed? If you heard that, if you did hear the question that I asked.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hold on, let me get my numbers because I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Okay.
Basically, those numbers are coming from the budgetary compliance report. That's a report that's issued annually by the state accounting office. And from their records, and this is information that was reported by the Department of Labor, I guess, to the state accounting office for the annual report, they showed that we did have a lapse in those programs for the last 3 fiscal years.
Thank you.
In the amounts that you mentioned earlier.
Number 22.
Can you answer the question of are there other areas where they could have made 2% cuts besides the Division of Rehabilitative Services?
One of the areas that they could have, I guess, is the safety inspections. That is a state-funded program. And in addition, they have the labor admin program, unemployment and workforce services. But, the agency has stated that those are collected funds and not really state funds. So there's a little bit of just misunderstanding on the interpretation of those funds.
Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The cuts with safety inspections, and maybe this was a question I should have asked someone else. This may not be your question, but if you can answer it. what are the safety inspections?
The commissioner and his department may want to answer that question.
Okay, that's not a problem then. And then I'll waive my second question.
Okay.
I wanted to ask a question on the budget instructions to agencies. Were they told to make cuts, or were they asked for recommended cuts, and their instructions from that, please?
Yes, budget instructions, I believe, were issued in July. I'm not sure of the exact date, or the first part of August, and all agencies were supposed to submit a 2% reduction plan.
All right, were those requested, or was it pretty much a required cut?
Well, the agency actually, for the Department of Labor, they actually exempted some funds, so they did not really submit a whole 2% based on their state funds budget. They took a pro rata share and then took, 2% off of that, which is in the Division of Rehab Services, to come up with their 472.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question for this lady? All right. Thank you for coming forward. We might need you again in just a minute, but we'll go ahead and hear the rest of this testimony here.
Okay,
thank you. Archie McCullough.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, you're looking at someone that really needs that voc rehab to stay with the Department of Labor. I was diagnosed in 2007 with bipolar. I'm also dyslexic, and I'm also ADD, I believe. The vocational rehab has really helped me in a lot of ways. With self-esteem issues, when they send me out on jobs, that big letterhead, Department of Labor, it tells the people that I'm out to find a job. Just that letterhead alone, and the type of discipline that they require at the voc rehab helps out a lot. So I came down just to make that testimony. It's people like me. I don't have a physical disability, but you can't see my disability. And the Department of Labor really helps me, and that would be my testimony. I ask that you leave as is.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in. Eric Phillips. Ma'am, would you move to the microphone? That way we can pick it up on the television. Okay, if you'd start over again, please.
Hello, my disability is deafness. I am from Roosevelt, Warm Springs. This whole group is involved here. We are here in support of vocational rehab, because it's a program that is for life. We want it to stay under Department of Labor so that we can be served from this point on. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Tom Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I speak in favor of the governor's proposed bill, and I'd like to give you a little bit of my background as well. I worked 36 years with the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency as a counselor, human resource development specialist, and a manager. I'm the immediate past president of the National Rehabilitation Association, and I've also been president of the Georgia Rehabilitation Association. I chose rehabilitation counseling as my career from my college days. In 1973, I started to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor under the Department of Human Resources, which had just been created by Governor Jimmy Carter and the Georgia legislature. Formerly, the Rehabilitation Agency was part of the State Department of Education. Over the years of my career, I experienced many changes in the administration of the agency as a frontline worker. As a division within the DHR, vocational rehab was widely respected and known as progressive and astutely managed. Many strong and influential leaders emerged over that time, including several presidents of the National Rehabilitation Association. Now, I think we can all agree that all of us, only want to see the VR program placed where it can best achieve its mission and work toward its vision. On the federal level, the State Federal Vocational Rehabilitation Program is administered by the U.S. Department of Education, and its legislation is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended. In the late 90s, the Rehabilitation Act became part of the Workforce Investment Act and has been reauthorized once since then. The U.S. Department of Labor funds several jobs programs which emphasize a one-size-fits-all approach to securing employment, while the U.S. Department of Education, through the Vocational Rehabilitation Program, emphasizes an individualized, comprehensive approach to the eligible individual in securing training and careers. This paradigm holds true at the state level as well. In my experience, the Georgia Department of Labor has failed to recognize the significant distinctions of the VR program and provide adequate support for its uniqueness. And there are many reasons for this. First, the organizational culture. At the time of the merger of the Georgia Department of Labor and DRS in 2000, the organizational cultures of the two agencies could not have been more different. DRS had clear mission, vision statements, a strong commitment to achievement, forward thinking and planning, a participatory management style with hiring decisions made at the local level, and a highly trained, empowered, and motivated workforce with a passion for helping people with disabilities achieve work and independence. The contrast with DOL could not have been greater. DOL was a top-down, military-style and managed state agency with decisions made only at the top levels. This resulted in significant delays in all hiring decisions and the loss of highly qualified people who had been interviewed and selected but could not wait 6 or 8 weeks for a hiring decision from Atlanta. DOL also failed to recognize the significance of qualified rehabilitation professional in the federal legislation, which requires the VR agency to employ according to the highest level of qualification within that state. Therefore, rehabilitation counselors must have counseling degrees at the master's level and in Georgia be nationally certified. In the years VR has been part of DOL, the level of pay for qualified rehabilitation counselors has slipped so dramatically, and opportunities for employment in both public and private sectors has increased to the extent that our counselors have been leaving for much better paying counseling jobs elsewhere. DOL has promised to address this issue, but has not delivered on its promises, nor has it demonstrated any commitment to do so. Accountability. I believe that placement within the Department of Human Services under the guidance of Commissioner Clyde Reese will result in greater financial accountability and transparency. DHS has vast experience in applying for and administering federal grants and funding, and it is accountable to its board and to the governor. Title I of the Rehab Act on the federal level provides the funding through qualified rehabilitation counselors for the training and employment to eligible individuals with disabilities, including those individuals with significant disabilities. Through the years, the Act has specified a discrete funding stream for the state VR agency to ensure the funds provided the needed and necessary services for people with disabilities. Lacking adequate accountability and oversight, DOL has diverted these funds to staff not dedicated to rehabilitation-related services and has returned much-needed funds to the federal government because its budget did not meet the federal match, as has already been mentioned today. In my discussions with national figures, in rehabilitation. I've learned that in most cases where the VR agency is housed within departments of labor, this appears to be the case, that the funds, they have a tendency to commingle the funds, thereby depriving eligible rehabilitation or eligible clients of vocational rehabilitation of necessary services. And in conclusion, thank you for your attention to this. Thank you for hearing what I have to say. The VR program is and has been ill-served by its placement within the Georgia Department of Labor because of its constitutional structure and organizational culture. And two, for the same reasons, the Department of Human Services offers a place where the Division of Rehabilitation Services can and will improve its services for the benefit of Georgia's citizens with disabilities.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, we've got a couple of people that have questions for you. Number 19.
Yes, sir, Mr. Wilson. First of all, I appreciate your commitment to vocational rehabilitation. I try to get my hands around about a lot of different things. One of the things when Commissioner Reese had testified before, one of the questions that had come up, one of the reasons that DOL was saying that they wanted to keep it there was because of the commitment to placing people, but we all know that there are certain instances where people can't be placed into the labor force. And I was very concerned about the safety net. In your opinion, if it was to be placed back under Commissioner Reese's group, would that safety net be in place to take care of this?
Of course it was. It was there when we were in DHR before. In fact, under DHR, we formed partnerships with all of the mandatory partners in the Workforce Investment Act in preparation for one-stop contacts and relationships with all the other agencies that are involved, and I see no issue with this whatsoever.
Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You gave a list of some of the things that are wrong with vocational rehab being in the Department of Labor. Are these things that have recently come about under Mr. Butler, or are these long-term issues that have been in place?
These are more long-term issues. It's throughout the 10 years or so that we have been a part of the Department of Labor. These things have been true in my experience.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Number 24.
Mr. Tom,
yes.
Has it been 10 years since it's been vocational rehab been put over to DOL? Is that
it was either 2000 or 2001, if anyone remembers exactly. 2001.
Okay. Now, previous to that, was it previously in the Department of Human Services previously, and how many years was it there?
Yes, that's correct. It was in the Department of Human Resources from the time of its creation in 1972 or 3 until it was moved to the Department of Labor in 2000 or 2001.
Oh, and one last question. Why? Why did they move it? Why did they move it from Human Services to Department of Labor? And I'm understanding now why we want to move it back, but why was it moved in the first place?
Okay. There were some stated and unstated reasons for that. The stated reasons, which appeared to make a lot of sense, were the same reasons you hear from a lot of people that are against this bill. The stated reasons were that by being associated with a jobs type agency, that this would more effectively allow people to be served who have disabilities. But there's a great deal of difference in the types of jobs that jobs programs that exist within the Workforce Investment Act and vocational rehab. The vocational rehab cases and jobs involve a very comprehensive approach, and the jobs through the Workforce Investment Act are basically very generic type programs that that get a person to work as quickly as possible is the primary focus, and not necessarily provide the services that they need to have a career type job. Did I answer your question? Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Sure.
Crystal Bellner.
Sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the House. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Hi. My name is Crystal Billner, and I represent the Georgia Advocacy Office. We are an independent, private, nonprofit agency designated by the governor as Georgia's statewide protection and advocacy system to protect and advocate for the human and legal rights of persons with disabilities. The responsibility and authority of protection and advocacy systems are mandated by federal law and their implementing regulations. We have the authority to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect, to monitor rights, to provide training on rights, and to pursue legal, administrative, and other remedies on behalf of people with disabilities. The Georgia Advocacy Office also represents part of national collaboratives with the Rehabilitation Services Administration right now. Because of our work and others within Georgia, including vocational rehabilitation, Georgia is receiving some national recognition. We have ongoing technical assistance projects with vocational rehabilitation that has actually increased the employment of people with disabilities, including people with significant disabilities. We advocate for the integrated employment of all Georgians at or above minimum wage. According to the Rehab Act, as you know, the purpose of vocational rehabilitation services is to assist individuals in the various stages of employment. The intended outcome for individuals receiving VR services is self-sufficiency through employment. Segregating these services for individuals with disabilities outside the Department of Labor does not necessarily foster an inclusive workforce in Georgia. We advocate for people with disabilities who are experiencing barriers to employment, including but not limited to barriers with vocational rehabilitation services. We advocate for these individuals to receive funding and support for training, post-secondary education, accommodations, assistive technology, job searches, negotiation with employers, disclosure of disability, to name a few. We are requesting transparency in any proposed transfer of VR services. We support the State Rehabilitation Council's request for public hearings. As the protection and advocacy system, we are attentive to the harms of disruption in services. We are requesting an impact analysis on the proposed transfer's effect on the quality and quantity of services being provided now and in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. Anicio Correa. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad.
Thank you. You did very well, by the way, with my last name. Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Anicio Correa, Vice President for Programs at the Center for the Visually Impaired in Atlanta. Each year, CVI empowers some 5,000 people of all ages impacted by vision loss to live with independence and dignity. For nearly 50 years, CVI has contracted with the state to provide thousands of Georgians with vision loss the specialized needed training to excel in the classroom, graduate from high school, obtain successful employment, and continue active participation in their communities. In the past 2 years, the Georgia Department of Labor has improved its services immensely for people with vision loss. The concerns for a change that we have heard from consumers are most likely due to the good work of Labor Commissioner Butler and his staff. We want that good work to continue. It has not been easy, however, for the needs of people with vision loss to measure up to the expectations of job placements in the Department of Labor. Many adult clients were denied access to programs by the OL because of former restrictions in income level, or because they told their VR counselor they were not ready to work. They didn't want a job. This is a very natural reaction for someone who has grown up with vision and lost it as an adult. If your lifelong primary method of learning has been visual, as it is with 80% of all learning, and suddenly your vision is gone, You can't imagine being able to do a job, let alone get yourself to a work site, prepare a lunch, or even figure out what clothes to wear. Our CVI professionals help people with vision loss learn the skills they need to be successfully employed outside the home or as homemakers, and to continue to live independently in their own homes. Adapting to life without vision requires a combination of daily living skills and communication skills that must be learned, skills that must be mastered prior to seeking employment. Learning to use a white cane and public transportation is an arduous process. You should try it. It takes more than a few weeks, sessions, or few months to learn how to successfully navigate changing trains at 5 Points train station. I do that every day. Learning Braille or computer software that speaks or magnifies are skills that cannot be learned in an afternoon or even a week. Our diabetes epidemic in Georgia has increased the number of folks who must learn to manage their diabetes before they even think of employment. Many of our adult clients have successfully gained jobs, and that will not change with the proposed move of rehabilitation services to DHS. In proposing this move, I believe that Governor Deal and Commissioner Reese have focused on providing greater support for the entire process of rehabilitation, learning to live independently, and this we wholeheartedly support. As our colleagues at DOL know, it takes longer for a person with vision loss to be prepared to go to work to go to work. It takes really usually up to 4 to 18 months on average, and reinforcement and repetition of training is often necessary. Our work is different from most worker training programs that are administered under DOL. So while the DOL has come a long way, we support the Governor and Commissioner's proposal because we believe that DHS has the best expertise to help people with vision loss achieve success in the workplace. Their approaches and mindset are more consistent with the specialized services we provide for the unique needs of our clients. Unemployment for people who are blind is 70% nationwide. We beat those percentages at CVI and will continue to do so as we open up more jobs through our contact center business enterprise that CVI has created. Yes, we also measure success by jobs, but that is not the only our measure of success. We know that initially employment may not be a goal that our clients have set for themselves. They are simply trying to adapt to live without sight. From our long-standing work with DHS in aging services, we are aware of the array of services this agency offers. They have been excellent partners in supporting low vision needs. They understand that independence can be measured in many ways, not just jobs. Many blind people will continue to use the services of the Department of Labor to seek employment without needing additional services. As our clients gain confidence and master living and communication skills, they will too set and achieve goals for employment which at first might have seemed impossible. Moving rehabilitation services from DOL to DHS has the potential to open up resources that many people may not have known or were available to them. We also hope that the DHS expertise in managing federal grants will bring even more resources from the federal matching funds to the rehabilitation program. Many people with vision loss are supportive of the governor's efforts to align rehabilitation programs with the state agency that has the most experience in working with people with disabilities. We support their effort and look forward to expanding the progress made in the past 2 years. We want to continue providing the best possible services to people with vision loss, involving them at every step of the way. We appreciate this opportunity, and we thank you for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. We have a question, if you would.
Sure.
24.
Without embarrassing you, sir, how long have you had vision loss?
Since I was 3 years of age.
Okay, were you ever under the other previous department before going into the Department of Labor?
No, sir. I moved here to Georgia in 2006 to work at the Center for the Visually Impaired.
Did you have any vocational rehab in other states?
Yes, sir.
Was it one of these two departments?
Yes. I've worked in several states during the last 35 years, and some of the states had rehabilitation within education, human services, health. It really is varied tremendously.
And one last question. Now, I understood you to say that the last 2 years has been an improvement, and you want to continue that, but yet and still you are moving to endorse a movement.
Yes, sir. I believe the improvement that has happened can continue because it's an improvement within the vocational rehabilitation program itself. And my understanding from hearing the communication from the transition teams is that VR will continue to be one separate program within DHS. So I can't imagine that those improvements could not continue.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Marco Farrow. Marco? Marcia, I'm sorry. Or your A looked like an O. Okay. All right.
That's all right. That's okay. Okay.
We'll get it out to the committee. Thank you.
Can I begin now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am visually impaired, and I did not sign my name, so I'll just blame Miss whoever for that. But I am proud to be here. I am proud to be born in Georgia. I am proud that my granddaddy and my daddy were military. I'm proud my brother was military. And I say that because, contrary to all these other testimonies you've heard, my mom and daddy taught me to work, okay? I didn't need DOL or DHS, either one, to go to work. And I went to college. I was fortunate for 2 years only to have some help from the vocational rehabilitation. I'm 55 years old, blind when I was 10. Do the math. I have paid my own way, just like you would have done. That's okay, too, all right, because I don't expect a handout. I'm looking for a hand up, but not a handout. My dad would turn over in his grave if he thought I was here asking you for a handout. But I will say to you that it's getting harder out there for people to find jobs. I'm fortunate to be employed. I have a master's degree in vision rehab. I worked hard for that financially and otherwise. But I also want to tell you what happened to me. I went to work for the state of Georgia as a full-time state merit employee in 1981 in the Department of Mental Health, Human Services, and Substance Abuse. So for those of you who've been around a while, you know that particular agency began to privatize. Department of Mental Health began to privatize. So I was a strange animal. I was a state merit employee working for a non-profit organization. As my vision became worse, I have retinitis pigmentosa. As my vision became worse and I was unable to keep up with the paperwork, this was in 2004, 5, 6, I asked many times to have some help, and I was always told that I made too much money, my husband made too much money to get help that I needed to sustain my job as well as to help me to get higher education. And again, I sort of accepted that, but it literally cost me my job. I was forced to retire in 2006 because, frankly, the little nonprofit agency that I was working for basically couldn't afford to pay for the expensive technology that I needed to continue to work, and I had no resources to fall back on Again, I became involved in DHS when I was 16 years old. So I can tell you that means test hurt me for years. So I don't know where some of these other testimonies come from, because I'm living proof that the means test was there for the level of income. And again, I was actually forced to retire. So, you know, I'm a retired state employee now. I'm liking it. You know, hey, I mean, I like being able to do some things, and I'm still working part-time. But I can tell you, I wanted to keep working. I was angry. I was one angry lady. I wanted to keep working, and it was not fair in 06, and it's not fair in 12. And I just asked, whatever decision you make, I'd like to see us stay under Commissioner Butler. I can tell you that means test has been removed. I can actually get services now for the first time since 1977. I can get services. But I asked you not to make a hasty decision, because it's people like me that you affect. It's people like me who are already living with a disability, and I'm not here to whine, but I'm telling you, it is not easy. And when you lose your job, not because you wasn't a good employee, but because you can't see, how unfair is that? I was a good employee. I worked hard. I got good ratings. I always was a good employee. I was working early and there late, but they had to say, we can't keep you anymore. I hope you don't find yourself in that place ever. And I thank you for listening to me.
All right, thank you. Hold on just a minute. Representative Hextall, you had a question for her?
No, I was just going to make a comment that one who loves to laugh and one who has joy, I am very, very impressed with you, and I mean, like I am with all the others. But I love your joy and your optimism, and just keep that in your heart, because you can see a lot further than a lot of people can.
Amen.
All right, thank you for coming. Cheryl Usury.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here this afternoon and to speak to you. My name is Cheryl Meadows Ussery. I am Executive Director of SHARE, which is the Speech, Hearing, and Rehabilitation Enterprises of Coastal Georgia, Inc. It is a nonprofit organization that helps people with disabilities. I became Executive Director in about 1990. In 1986, I started on the board of directors. I served as the treasurer, as the vice president, and just as I was becoming president, about to become president, our director left. And we found out that she did that was because she knew that we didn't have the money to pay her anymore. So for 3 years, I served as president of the board as well as the executive director. I also have been very, very active in the Georgia Rehabilitation Association, which helps people. We work with, our mission is to advocate and educate people who work with people with disabilities. I have worked and served a number of committees in that group, in that association, and I'm a past president of the Georgia Rehab Association. I also have been very active in the National Rehabilitation Association, serving on the board of directors and chairing the last 3 national conferences. I also serve on the Transition Committee for Coastal Georgia, and we help people who need to find jobs, but also to transition and be as independent as they can. So it's kind of an overall gamut of transition properties. I also serve on the Mayor's Committee for Disabilities, and I'm also on the Coastal Area Development Area Agency on Aging. I serve as secretary of that council. Not only do we serve in that area, we serve people who are older, but we also serve people who have disabilities. In the early 1900s, the vocational rehabilitation program was begun by the federal government. It is mandated and regulated by the federal government. And in 1992, the federal government made an amendment to the program, and that was that they required all people, even the most severely disabled people, the opportunity to seek gainful employment through the vocational rehabilitation program. About 4 years ago, a friend of mine retired from vocational rehabilitation, and because of the job he did in VR, people knew that he was very much aware of the criteria that you must meet in order to be a VR client. Several people approached him during his early years of retirement, and last year, on three different occasions, people approached him and said, and sometimes it was family members of people who were disabled, and one of the cases was a person themselves with a disability, asking if they met the criteria for VR. He told them that yes, they did, and suggested that each of those people go to their local VR office in order to apply for services. After each person went to their local VR office, and there were 2 VR offices involved in this, they each called him and said, I was turned away. I was given no reason, but I was turned away. About 3 weeks after this happened, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but the state of Georgia is divided up into regions for the VR program, and each region has a director. The man who had been his region director when he was still employed with vocational rehabilitation called him one evening at home and said, under no circumstances are you ever to suggest that anyone go to VR for services again. To me, that speaks volumes about our VR program. The school system has, in my opinion, a very unique program that involves vocational rehab, and it's a very good program. In your teen years, mid to late teen years, many people become eligible to be vocational rehabilitation clients. And there's a young man named Ronnie who lives in coastal Georgia where I live. He's a wonderful young man, very delightful, and I was going to say he's a joy to talk to, but that's not right. He's a joy to listen to because he doesn't let you do much talking. But Ronnie is mentally challenged and should have been a VR client several years ago. But when the people in the school system, who their administrators and teachers who are involved in the transition teams in the school system, when those people suggested, because they knew that Ronnie met all the criteria, that he be added to the VR caseload, he was turned down. VR told the teachers and the administrators in the school system that they didn't have room for him. Ronnie is now 21 years old, and in the state of Georgia, if you're in special education, you can stay in school until you're 21 years old. And he is going to graduate this year. Now, he is very mentally challenged, but he is going to graduate this year in May with a special ed diploma. It's different than a regular high school diploma. At the transition meeting recently that they hold for people who are going to graduate from high school, the VR counselor was there. The transition counselor was in attendance at the meeting. The school personnel were there, and there were some administrative people and several of Ronnie's teachers through the years. Ronnie's parents were there, and Ronnie was there. And the VR counselor told him that, yes, he did qualify for VR services, and as soon as he had his business plan in place, that to give the VR counselor a call. Ronnie's very mentally challenged. He didn't have a clue on earth what a business plan was. The people from the school system had been in this business, some of them for 20 plus years. They had never ever heard of a business plan, and needless to say, his parents had no clue what that was. One more example, one more case where somebody who qualified was not served. These are 2 examples. I could give you many, many more. I heard recently that there was a 24% increase in the number of closures. And a closure, you probably know, but a closure in VR is you take a client in, you provide the services that are necessary for that client. Then they go to work and they work in that job for a certain period of time, and then they're closed, and that's considered a closure. I heard that the closure rate had increased 24%. And I don't doubt that for 1 minute, because the VR clients have been told, the VR staff, the VR staff and counselors have been told that they are not to accept anyone as a client that they cannot get in and get out and do a very quick turnaround and quick closure. So the people who need lots of help and lots of time and lots of service simply aren't accepted as clients.
Okay.
When I first became involved with working with people with disabilities, which earlier today was pointed out to me was many, many, many years ago, when I would attend region and national conferences and meetings, people would ask where I was from. I'd say I was from Georgia, and they would say, wow, Georgia has the best vocational rehabilitation program in the nation. I had absolutely nothing in the world to do with that, but it did make me feel very proud. Now when people ask me where I'm from and I say I'm from Georgia, they either make no comment or they say to me, do you think your VR program will ever improve?
Okay, Ms. Chancellor, I'm going to have to call time on you here.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything you want to say just to wrap up?
The people of Georgia who have disabilities are citizens just exactly like we are. They deserve the best they can get, and under Commissioner Clyde Reese and under the Department of Human Services, I do believe that transparency, accountability, leadership, and openness are available and will be provided. I think that the people in Georgia and the VR program can once again be the very best.
All right. Thank you for coming in. Jimmy DeFore, is that, I can't read the last name. Okay.
Sorry about that. My writing, I'm afraid. My name is Jimmy DeFore. I'm a former director of the Division of Rehabilitation Services. I retired in 2002 as Assistant Commissioner for the Department of Labor after 34 years service for the state of Georgia and providing services to persons with disabilities. I've held just about every position within rehab over that 34 years. I started as a counselor, worked as a counselor, a placement specialist. I've worked in other capacities in supervision. I worked as a deputy director for the Division of Rehab Services in the Department of Human Resources, and then was the director of rehab services as we transitioned to the Department of Labor. I then, as I said, worked in the Department of Labor as Assistant Commissioner over Rehabilitation until I retired. I've seen a lot of changes in rehabilitation throughout those years. Many of those changes Mr. Johnson mentioned. When I began as a counselor, it was a process of establishing eligibility, which is a part of the vocational rehabilitation program. It's not an entitlement program, it's an eligibility program. So there are criteria that have to be met in order to provide those services under VR. But as a part of that process, the things that I've seen that have been so positive within the vocational rehabilitation program have been the involvement of a person with a disability in leading a team of professionals who are working together to help that person identify barriers to employment and to remove those barriers in every way possible. Ms. Ushery mentioned the fact that the emphasis became working with persons who are severely disabled in one way or another. That was a very positive move for the vocational rehabilitation program, and one that the state of Georgia VR program took a leadership role in. In 1999, when we began looking at the movement of the vocational rehabilitation and other rehabilitation programs over to the Department of Labor, our staff took a leadership role in trying to make that transition successful. And we did so in a way that we cooperated and supported the effort as an attempt to improve services to persons with disabilities. As that transition took place in 2001, there was a great deal of cultural difference between the Department of Labor and the Vocational Rehabilitation and Rehabilitation Services Department. The major difference that I observed as a person serving in both capacities was there is an admirable goal in both the Department of Labor and Rehabilitation Services to assist a person with a disability in going to work successfully. But there's a difference in the focus of those two programs. The Rehabilitation Services Vocational Rehabilitation Program emphasizes a comprehensive approach to working with an individual. It starts out with trying to provide assistance in looking at medical or other disabilities that might cause that person not to be able to go to work. That leads into further assessment vocationally. It leads into counseling services by a professional counselor, and that's another positive improvement that's taken place within the vocational rehabilitation program through the years. The certified rehabilitation counselor that Mr. Wilson mentioned is a strong program that has developed through advocacy of persons with disabilities throughout the country. And now those persons that provide that counseling are trained, qualified professionals who must have a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling and also meet a 4-hour national certification exam. That exam covers technical aspects of rehabilitation. It covers disability. It covers technology related to disability and all of those areas that are important for a person who is going to work with that person in establishing a way to overcome barriers.
Mr. DeFore, I'm gonna need to call time on you if you could just wrap it up, if you could.
Okay. The focus of the Labor Department has been on a much more focused approach to employment, which is much short-term, and the length of the comprehensive approach makes it difficult for the counselors within the VR program under the Department of Labor to function in the way they should in the length of working with a person with a disability. I believe that under the Department of Human Services, under the direction of Commissioner Clyde Reese, there will be a much stronger emphasis, understanding, and support of that comprehensive approach that's necessary for a person with a disability to get a successful job that leads into a career, which is the goal. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I am very much supportive of this effort to move, and I ask that you vote in support of that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming forward. We have heard everyone that signed up today. Chairman McCall, you want to wrap up?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank y'all for listening to both sides and all sides, and I learned how to read a watch a long time ago. Thank y'all.
Chair recognizes Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's been very, very enlightening for me to sit here today and last week to listen to everybody. And one of the things that's come out of this whole thing to me is a great admiration for everybody who's come forward. But the one thing that probably has made my mind up is the fact that this is an issue that I think touches everyone in the community and in the state of Georgia. And, you know, I think I sit here as a committee member and I can see both sides or whatever, but it does touch the entire state of Georgia. And I happen to believe that it's something that should be taken up by the legislature. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion that we pass the HB 31 bill and move it on to the legislature.
All right, I have a motion that we pass House Bill 831 to the full House. Do I have a second? Have a second. Is there any other discussion by the members of the committee? All right, number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both sides for making such a compelling presentation. Oftentimes we sit on these committees and we're very fortunate to represent our constituents. and we listen with open ears and open minds, and we try to determine what's the best course of action to take. I was very naive before this discussion in the past 2 days, and I didn't know which direction I'm going to go. I can appreciate what my colleagues are saying, but I'm just people-oriented. When I don't know, I listen to people. And when I listen to people that are responsible for the lives of people that are, and I love what my colleague calls it, different abilities. I like that term. I had never heard that before. Thank you very much for presenting that to us. I have to listen to those that know more than I do. Now, I respect my colleagues very, very much. But on this particular issue, after listening to the constituents, listening to the people of Georgia, I'm going to respect your position and pass it along, but I'm still going to have to vote no.
Number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we had voted last week, I definitely would have voted no. But I have listened today. I've tried to be open-minded. I've listened to the different presentations. I do believe that the ones who have given us today, who are really in expertise positions, are convincing me, they say convinced me, that it's going to be a positive. Now, when you get back to looking at the years past, you know, I asked a question a while ago. If I'm correct, from 72 to 2000, it was in the human services. That's for 28 years. Then we moved it in 2001 over to where it's at now, which has been another 10, 11 years. So let's go 10, 11 years in a new one, and maybe 10, 11 years now we change it again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Number 27. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All members of the committee have had a voice in this. We've heard everybody in the audience that wanted to speak for 2 days. We have spent pretty close to 3 hours on this, which is a lot longer than other committees that I'm on spend at reaching a decision to send a measure to the full House. So we're going to take a vote. It will be a voice vote, and then if there's a question, we'll do a hand raising. All those in favor of the motion to pass this on to the full House, if you would say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The ayes have it. The motion is passed. I'm not going to recognize you for anything right now. It is passed and will go to the full committee. Those of you in the audience that have made testimony and want to contact all the legislators now, that is certainly up to you. We appreciate you coming today, and the meeting is adjourned.